having salt within ourselves, but it's really not talking about a health principle right here. It was talking about the body of Christ. Where's the body at? Wave at me. Where the hands and the feet and the mouthpiece of God, all that other good stuff. We hear all those sermons, how the Bible says we're many members, but one body fitly and joined together, and he's the ligaments and the compound that holds us all together and all that good stuff. And we realize that he sent his son, and Christ is the head of the church, that our head is Christ, and we're the body, and we're supposed to move and act and move according to what our head says, just like our natural body. We understand all that, right? But when we start talking about that the salt that the body should have salt within it, what we're saying is that there should be a certain content of salt in the church. In other words, we should have people that add to us. We should have people that can sing beautifully, and we should have people that can play their instruments well. We should have people that can add to the building and help it, keep it clean and help us keep it functional. We should have people in ministry to help do youth ministry and all the kinds of ministry. But this is the danger of it. You get too much salt in a body, and what happens? The body dies. This is my issue with salt. We have become experts at salting salt. Can I try that again? We've got more ministries and more outreaches and more resources and more clubs. And I'm not saying all those things are bad. But it did not say we are the salt of the church. It said we're the salt of the earth. In other words, our job is not just to come here and try to add here. Our job is to add in our communities and the places of business. Our job is to add in the school system wherever we may go to. Wherever we are, that's where we're supposed to be salt. What happens if the body gets too much salt? Will somebody tell me? It will die. What's happened to the church? For the most part, most churches are dead. Nothing against that if you want to be dead, but that's not how I was supposed to live. Most churches have one successful move of God, and you can put that on life support, and it will die a long, slow death through the process. And they'll spend all their time talking about that one and waiting on the next one. And what happens is that they become irrelevant to the next generation to the point, little by little, the numbers begin to trickle down till they find themselves at a point powerless to perform, purposeless. And what happened to a church that at one time had potential to do so much? They got too much salt in the body, and it died. Because if you think our whole purpose for being the salt of the earth is to come here and just have good church, pray for your preacher because he's mad at you today. This is the thing about it. I got this little flashlight. I got to show you something. Got this thing for Christmas. It's really cool. You have to wind it up, so you're going to have to give me a second. It's old school, I guess. You're going to wind this thing up almost like a race car. It's going. It's supposed to be these bright LED lights and all that good stuff. And let's try it out. Okay, we got some light. This does a whole lot of nothing in here right now, right? Jeff, will you do me a favor and kick the lights for us up there just for a second? Good stuff. Are you seeing it? I'll stand in front of the camera so they can see it. We got you. Look at it. It starts to shine and open up things. Turn them back on for me. If the only time you ever let your light shine is in church, you're trying to shine light where there is light, and it does no good. Now, I knew you were going to be slow because I'm slow too. Let me try it again. If the only time you ever raise your hands, the only time you ever put a smile on your face and act like you even know who God is in church, you're shining light where there's already light. Yes. Find someplace dark. Find someplace where nobody has any hope left and is ready to give up, and let your light shine. If the only thing you can do is say, you know what, I've been there too. If that's all you have to let your light shine, use it. I'm not saying you've got to have a Billy Graham ministry and go worldwide and do all the, I'm not saying you have to be extreme about it, but I'm saying just let your light shine. Remember that song, This Little Light of Mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. What happened when we got older? We think that's a kid's principle, but really it was just written for kids to understand it so that when we grew up as children, and when we grew old, we wouldn't depart from it, but somehow everything got mixed up, and we feel like the only time our light's ever supposed to shine is in here. Maybe, I had a watch commander one time, And he wasn't a person. He went to church sometimes, and he considered himself a religious person, but he didn't really like church very much. And he felt like that his only job, the only thing he could do to allow his light to shine is when somebody needed a day off, he would go to the very limits of his ability and do everything he could to let an officer off. And in his own little way, he was letting light shine. That didn't mean a whole lot to me until I got sick one day and needed off. And even though on the books I had the time, we were understaffed and overworked, and I shouldn't have been off. But because I had a watch commander that understood about letting his light shine, his philosophy was, if I can do something good for you, then it will do something good for me. And this is a man that didn't even go to church. And we got people that come here every Sunday and every Wednesday. And for whatever reason, they feel like you've got to have a turnaround collar and a bottle of oil and a business card that says Reverend so-and-so to let your light shine. Your light could be just that you help somebody change a flat tire on the side of the road, or whatever. It could be anything. Whatever you could do to add to their life to make it better, that's where the light shines. Yes. And if you're waiting to do it here, we've got enough light in the room. Does anybody believe me when I'm talking about it today? Here we are, 2 Kings chapter 2 and 21. Talking about salt still. This is all foundational. I've got 5 weeks of this stuff. We're going to go somewhere with it, I promise. You got to remember this stuff. Then Elisha went to the spring of the waters and cast the what? Salt in it. This particular spring, the women were having miscarriages and getting sick, and people were dying, and God told Elisha to go and sprinkle salt in the water. Thus saith the Lord, this is what God was saying, I, not the salt, have healed these waters. There shall not be any more death, miscarriage, or barrenness, and bereavement because of it. Isn't that amazing? That God, He's the one that touched the waters and healed it to the point that people didn't get sick anymore. But He didn't have to, but He used salt as the vehicle to do it. What does that mean to us today? Let's just update the revelation and put in our terms today. God does not need us to move. God is big enough, He can change everything Himself. But He said, you are the salt. Yes. So, if I can get inside of you and sprinkle you in the troubled waters, and sprinkled you in the troubled economy, and sprinkle you in a troubled world, I, not you, make the difference, but I will use you because you're the salt. So it takes the pressure off to think that we have to perform, and it takes the pressure off, and we can breathe easy and realize that, guess what? It's not us that's changing things, it's God, but He will do it through us. We're sitting in the car, He gets in to ride to town, and when He gets there and does all the work, guess what? He just used the skin we're in to change everything and rearrange it for the better. Why? Because we are the salt of the earth. Do you believe it yet? I'm just asking. We're the salt of the earth. Just for sake of time, we're doing okay though. In the book of Luke chapter 10, I'm not going to read this to you, but we read it before. We've talked about it. It's the story of the Good Samaritan parable. In case you haven't heard that, let me just tell you a little bit. Luke chapter 10, verse 25, a man called a lawyer came up, and it's not someone that a lawyer of today's standard, but it's someone who had dedicated their life to studying what was called the Torah, or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of, or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and dedicating themselves to the Scripture to the point. And this was the guy you would go to say, what does this mean? Because he should have it all together. He was supposed to be all that in a bag of chips and lay it out on. He was supposed to know the ins and the outs, and this was the person whose life you were supposed to be able to watch and be able to live your life accordingly and be as close to God as possible by his actions. He was called a lawyer. And he came to Jesus, and he was trying to tempt Jesus, and he began to ask these questions, and he wanted to get Jesus to give him the wrong answers. And Jesus was talking about love and all these different things, and Jesus said, let me tell you a story. And he picks up, and in verse 31, he says there was a priest, or I'm sorry, let me back this up just a little bit further. He said there was a man traveling on a road who had fell fault to robbers and had been stripped naked and left naked and bleeding on the highway side in a ditch. Verse 31 would tell us that a priest comes by and having seen the man crossed over on the other side of the road. He didn't cross over on the other side because he was going that way, but it was because he saw someone naked and bleeding and busted and disgusted and messed up in a place called the ditch that he crossed over to the other side. And the reason we understand what Jesus was saying as he was trying to bring a rebuke to the priest, because the priests were known by how clean their clothes were and the fact that their garments was spotless and didn't have any seams in it and was the best material. In other words, we knew he was a priest when he come to town because he just looked so good. And what Jesus was trying to say is that this man, this